Can you find the winning move to this position? Probably not. You may think that to get better at chess you need to study more opening theory, watch master games that you don't even understand, or lock yourself away on a mountain somewhere in hopes of reaching enlightenment. Wrong. What you actually need is tactics. Strengthening your tactical awareness can make you a monster on the chessboard. Check out my playlist on tactical training and learn fast. Now let's analyze that puzzle. As we can see, white's pieces are fairly active and in black's position. I'm sure you've noticed by now that your queen is hanging, but let's focus on something more valuable. Checkmate. The rook would love to land on the juicy f7 square and put the black king to sleep. But the bishop on c4 is guarding. So why don't we just remove the bishop? Brilliancy, disgusting, beautiful and terrifying. Mate threatened on f7, how can black defend against this? Hearts racing on both sides, black desperately searching for a way out and white praying that their queen sack wasn't in vain. But no matter what, checkmate is inevitable. And this, ladies and gentlemen, was a prime example of the symphonic chaos that can be created on the 64 squares. Hit that like button while you're still here, as we'll be covering the top 7 types of tactics you can use during your games. Buckle your seatbelts as you'll be hailing tactics on your opponents after learning this here on The Pawn Cloud. Up first we have the fork, attacking 2 or more pieces at the same time. Let's look at our first example. Pause the video right now to solve on your own. It is black to move, and as we can see, this knight is in enemy territory and there is a bit of piece interaction. The only critical move we see here is knight d2, but the rook just moves out of the way and there's nothing. But black finds this incredible idea: queen takes d3. White's only response is recapturing with the pawn, and thus knight d2 is potent as it attacks the undefended bishop and the rook. White can either save the rook and loose the bishop or trade the rook for the knight, leaving black with a winning position as they have a rook for a bishop. Let's look at something a little more advanced. When we look at the forcing moves, nothing really stands out. But to achieve a 4-digit elo, you always have to ask yourself, the rook! Yes, rook sacrifice on h1. If the king moves, white simply loses the queen, thus white has to take the rook, and still loses the queen as the rook is now pinned. The next type of tactic you need to know is attraction. You'll most commonly use this motif to clear the way for a checkmate or promoting a pawn. Pause the video right now to solve on your own. The best way to analyze a position is to look at what the pieces are doing and what they can do. As we can see, this knight is taking squares away from the black king. The rook can infiltrate with a check as well as the queen. However, black is threatening a checkmate of their own, so every move white makes has to be a check too. So what could possibly be the idea here? Yes, queen sacrifice on f8. If the king moves, there's simply a checkmate on g7, so black has to take and loose to rook d8 mate. Here's the next attraction puzzle. I'm sure you've noticed a recurring pattern by now. The winning move here is rook takes h3. If the pawn recaptures, there's simply a mate on h2, so the black king has to hide, and again. Rook sacrifice on h1. Taking the rook is the only move, and now the path for the queen is cleared and delivers a mate on h2. Our third tactical motif is the pin. Let's first identify all the pins in this position. As we can see here, there is a lurking mate on g7, so the f6 pawn is pinned. This rook has nasty intentions on the black queen, thus the g5 pawn is also pinned. The difference between an intermediate player and an advanced one lies in their ability to find critical moves and how to execute them effectively. Solid advice, but there aren't any crazy combinations in this position. The move here is simply rook takes g5, check to the king and the queen, pawn captures leads to mate on g7, and if the king moves, we just take the queen and convert to a winning endgame. Simple enough, right? Let's see if you can solve this next puzzle. Here we have a game between two 1000 rated players. We all know that 1000s don't blunder in the opening. Well, never say never. f4 is on the board and now white is losing. find the winning move for black. Well, we can assume that black can win a knight as white opened a line to their king, but nothing is achieved as white can defend everything, even this pawn attack can be thwarted. Remember what I said about finding critical moves and executing them effectively? The move here is knight takes d4, if white recaptures they simply lose the queen to the black bishop, so instead white has to continue this game without a knight, but we all know how sub 2000 games go, it's anybody's game. The next type of tactic is the skewer. This is a special tactic as it can only be performed by a queen, a bishop, and a rook. If we look at this position we can see that the only skewer ideas are along the 8th rank winning the rook. Now your job is to find the move that enables this rook's access. The move here is rook c1. White threatens to win the rook but also checkmate. Black's only response is to save the king and loose the rook. Now that you're up to speed with the skewer, let's try something a little more advanced. Here we have the second puzzle and black is looking to promote their pawns. The white king captures a pawn but this is a massive blunder. Can you find the winning move? That's right, bishop c5. If white captures, the black pawn simply promotes. If white tries to defend their bishop, black captures and none of the white pieces can stop the promotion. Thus white's only move is to block the pawn and loose the knight, but white is still losing as they can't defend against both pawns. The next tactical motif you need to know is overloading. In this position we can see that the rook on d1 is defending the bishop on d3, and simultaneously defending against any backrank infiltration. You could say that this rook is overloaded. Now black uses this to their advantage with queen takes d3. The king is in check and the rook can't be saved whilst getting the king out of danger. If king a1 there is simply a checkmate on d1. And if white captures the queen the back rank can now be exploited and white is lost. In our next puzzle white has a dream scenario of checkmate on g7. But the black queen is defending. However, the queen is also defending the back rank, and you already saw what happened when a piece was overloaded. Rook c8 check. Black can either loose the rook in the game or capture the rook removing the queen from the guard of the g7 square. What we've learned here is that an overloaded piece cannot do two things at the same time. The next type of tactic is the mating net. In this position we can see that the black king doesn't have any breathing room thanks to the white pieces. I'm sure you've noticed by now that our queen is hanging, but let's focus on something more valuable. How can the white pieces exploit the weakness of the black king? Queen g7 check. The black king has to capture and now the white pieces can uncork pure savagery. Does anybody here know how to checkmate with a knight and bishop? Knight f5 double check. The white pieces cover the king's escape squares. The king has to go backwards and suffers to the bludgeoning knight h6 mate. In our second puzzle we can see that the black king is already in a mating net. The white pieces are swarming the black king, but where is the kill shot? The move is bishop c4 check. The black queen captures and white now has opened the queen's access to the black king. Now white finds the brilliant move queen e8 check. This removes the knight and opens the bishop to support rook f8 mate. And the final tactic you need to know is the Desparado. In this position black plays the move f5 counter-attacking the white queen. If white takes, black takes. But white realizes that they're gonna lose their queen anyway, so why not take the bishop with a check, and then take the black queen. Now white only lost their queen but black lost their queen and their bishop. In our next puzzle we have a game between two grandmasters. Black plays knight d3 offering an exchange of knights. But white wants to trade on their own terms and plays knight c6. Black realizes that both knights will be lost anyway, so why not take a pawn too and counter-attack the queen. If the king takes there is simply a fork and black is up a pawn. So queen f3, but the knight takes another pawn with check and at the end of it all the knights are off the board but black is up 2 pawns.